Good to have you with us on this Monday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary. I took the dive over the weekend. I bought the tickets. I was in the front row behind the Packer bench last night in FedEx Stadium here in Washington, D.C., and I have to tell you, save all your money, folks, if you ever have a chance to do something like that. You can buy the tickets online. You can go to any NFL game. They're going to be spendy as hell. But since my wife and I had moved to Washington, I thought, well, you know, we've got to have a welcoming gift to ourselves. So I said, honey, what do you think about going to the Redskin Packer game? She was all about it. So we went, and it was fun. It was just a blast. You know what? Aaron Rodgers, you hear a lot about him as quarterback of the Packers, the stellar career that he's in the middle of. He's 32 years old. He certainly has at least 3 or 4 more years left, maybe more. The fact is that the quarterback is so important in the NFL. If the Vikings had Aaron Rodgers at quarterback yesterday, they wouldn't have had to worry about whether they're going to make a field goal or not. If the Redskins had Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, they would have won yesterday. Redskins are a good football team. They just don't have a guy that executes at the level and the consistency that Aaron Rodgers does. I mean, the quarterback is so horribly important in the scheme of things with every NFL team. And it was really interesting to watch the Packers operate yesterday. They got down 11-0, came back, took the lead at halftime at 17-11, then really outscored them and finished it out at 35-18. And it was a hell of a game. It was a lot of fun. Now, of course, the Pack goes to Arizona. I don't think that's going to be easy for Arizona. You know, you can look at it however you want, but to win an NFL playoff game on the road is not an easy thing to do. So we put some pictures out on our Facebook yesterday, sitting in the front row. We came across Senator Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota and Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin. They were walking in front of us down by the team, and they were coming up to their seats and whatnot. So we had a nice BS session with them. And so we put these pictures on Facebook, and everybody said, Ed, I just can't believe you're a Packer fan. Well, I am. I like the Vikings, too. The Vikings are okay, you know. But I like the way the Pack plays. I think they play hard. I think they'd be in a lot different position if Jordy Nelson hadn't gotten hurt. But I like the way they play the game. And so that's my team. Doesn't have anything to do with our connection to Madison, Wisconsin and the protests of 2010 or whenever they were. No, there's a lot of great people in the state, but I just like the way they play the game. All right, now, football and politics do mix, by the way. So we're sitting in the front row, and of course where we were is where a lot of Packer fans were. We start talking. And, you know, who are you? What do you do? Blah, blah, blah. Where are you from? Menominee, Wisconsin. Yeah. Okay, all good. What are you doing here in Minnesota? Well, you know how the conversation goes. I said, what about Bernie? What about Hillary? What are you thinking in Wisconsin? Feingold going to win? What's going on? And, oh, man, were they juiced. They wanted to talk it over. And it's very clear that there is a sense across the country, despite all the fundraising, despite all the boots on the ground and the teams that Bernie has got in Iowa, there are a number of progressives, I believe, across the country who just aren't sure whether Bernie can run the table. They like him. They like his issues. They like what he's doing. They don't dislike Hillary. And they're seeing how this thing plays out. And these folks were non-committal as to who they were going to support. But they all to a T said, well, Bernie, I don't know. Can he win? So this, I think, is the hurdle. And Bernie Sanders, ironically, on the tube yesterday, is addressing this.
Well, for a start, I would urge those voters all over this country, take a look at recent polls in which Bernie Sanders is matched with Republican candidates, Trump on down. Hillary Clinton is matched with Republican candidates. And so if people are concerned about electability, and Democrats should be very concerned, because we certainly do not want to see some right-wing extremist in the White House, I think Bernie Sanders is the candidate.
And Bernie's hitting us on the campaign trail over the weekend in Toledo, Iowa.
My opponent, Secretary Clinton, has basically raised an issue in recent days. And what she has said is, well, you know, you may like Bernie Sanders or not, but he's not electable. You got to vote for Hillary Clinton if you want to prevent a Republican from getting the White House. So let me respond to that in this way. The last national poll that I saw was done by a group called Quinnipiac, which is a fairly reliable pollster. had us defeating Donald Trump by 13 points, almost double of what Hillary Clinton was defeating him by. That's number one. Now, different polls have different results. But generally speaking, against the leading Republicans, more often than not, we do better than Hillary Clinton does. So if you want to make sure we don't have some right-wing extremist in the White House, I think I'm looking at the candidate. You're looking at the candidate who can do that.
So does it matter? Does it matter who gets the nomination? Well, in my heart, it does. But the point being here is that the progressive agenda in this country is in solid concrete with the American people, especially the young folks of this country who are concerned about college debt, who are concerned about fair taxation, who are concerned about health care and education and job creation. It is about jobs. And this is one of the reasons why I've been just beating the trail on this podcast, videocast, for several years about trade agreements in this country and how that is a hook to American jobs. Now, I'll take you to this story on this Monday morning, okay? And here we go again. Republic Steel in Lorain, Ohio is going to lay off 200 employees. In a statement released on Thursday, Republic Steel announced its temporary idling rolling mill operations at its facility. Now, when I was doing a cable show, we went to this facility and we saw what they did. And the story was steel that's being dropped on our market that's being undercut. The CEO, Jamie Vigil, said in a statement that we are positioned for growth and will be ready to provide capacity once the market turns around. Well, the market hasn't turned around because we're allowing, through a lousy trade agreement, for China and South Korea to put tubular goods on our market indiscriminately, cutting well below the price of production, and this is American jobs. And if you think that this is big, wait until the Trans-Pacific Partnership kicks into gear. And this is what I don't understand about Obama as he goes to the State of the Union address. 7 years ago, Obama was making a big pitch about the middle class. And there no doubt has been a pitch for the middle class and an effort for the middle class when it comes to saving the jobs, the automobile industry, the stimulus package, the tax cuts expiring on the Bush administration, the Bush tax cuts, and also the push for minimum wage. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was handed this president. But he can unravel all of that good by signing on to this trade agreement, which he is going to push very hard tomorrow night at the State of the Union address. And there's a host of Democrats. And look at it this way. This president does not stand with his party or the progressive movement when it comes to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Every single union in this country is against it. Every single union in this country doesn't want it. They've communicated that to the White House. But this trade negotiator, Froman, is a Wall Streeter. He's got Obama hoodwinked. Although that's what I thought months ago. I don't think the president's hoodwinked. I think he knows the issues, but he's too far down the line right now to make a change. And there are some real inherent problems with this. We're going to have a lot of Lorain, Ohio's if we have the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it's unfortunate that the president's going to make this a focal point of his State of the Union speech tomorrow night, and I hope the Democrats are strong enough to come out, and there's a number of conservative Republicans as well. They got to come out and hammer on this and push back. We're starting to enter the final phase of all of this. And so those are just some of the things as we go into this week of what I think is going to capture the news. For more on this, let's turn to United Steelworkers International President Leo Gerard. Mr. Gerard, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you, Ed.
We're going to start on a real positive note here. Steelers, I'll tell you what, they were kissing their plastic Jesus, weren't they?
Here's the deal. We had at least 20 seconds to go, and Big Ben would have moved the ball at least one or two more times, so we were going to win this no matter what happened.
Yeah.
And well, I'll tell you what, that was a disgrace, that performance at the end of the game. And Boomer Esiason said it right. He was embarrassed to have been a Cincinnati Bengal. I mean, that was just terrible.
Yeah. It's been kind of a helter-skelter season for the Steelers, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've had some serious injuries.
Yeah.
But
Well, can you win the next one? You got to go to Denver Sunday night. You got the late game on Sunday night now. That you never know. You just never know.
That it would be in my eyes good for the Steelers to beat Denver, because I've never liked that Republican quarterback they got. him and Papa John can both go down.
That's right. There you go. There's a couple of big-time righties right there, anti-worker and everything else. Mr. Gerard, we're going to get the State of the Union tomorrow night. The president's going to push a Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I'm pulling out a story this morning in Lorain, Ohio, where 200 workers are going to be laid off because of market conditions, a story you and I have talked about quite a bit. But this is a tip of the iceberg. This is a microcosm of what we're going to be facing. Under bad trade agreements, we've seen the dumping of product on our market because there's not enough fair protections and market economics for American workers. I mean, isn't it ironic that this is happening before the State of the Union? Your thoughts on all this?
I think it's terrible, but the thing is, it's predictable. People like you and I have been saying this for a long time now, and I've taken a position that is, I think, I shouldn't say I have, because it's been a position that our whole International Executive Board has taken, and that is, show us a trade deal that we've negotiated that has led to net job increases and upward pressure on wages, and we'll support it. There hasn't been one, and what's happening now is that China has publicly announced again that it's going to reduce its currency. It's got to get itself out of its mess of its domestic overcapacity by exporting. And just last week, a story came out where the Chinese government was rounding up union activists that were activists trying to create an independent labor movement in some of these workplaces. And they've been rounding them up and either interrogating them or putting them in jail. So what's happening in Lorain, Ohio, is a function of Chinese domestic overcapacity, Asian domestic overcapacity, finding an easy way to dump it on our markets. Plus, to be fair, that there's a downturn in construction and there's a downturn in the energy sector, which again creates opportunity for more dumping.
So how do we can reverse this by defeating the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I think that there is a strong enough effort right now and a good knowledge base within our lawmakers that this could happen. You agree?
I agree, and I think that one of the things that we need to do, we mean collectively those of us that understand the long-term and short-term repercussions of this trade deal, we need to aggressively go in and do membership education of the members of Congress and the Senate. And the writing is on the wall. And you know, Ed, you can take any part of what's in the trade agreement and the next parts of what's not in it. We've got nothing about currency. Well, when the Chinese announced they're going to reduce their currency, now they've said by upwards of 10%. That's a 10% subsidy of everything they want to ship to America. Mm-hmm. When we look at the existing language of the Trans-Pacific Partnership on rules of origin, 45%, I give them the benefit of the doubt because it says 30 to 45. So if you do 45% has to come from, quote, a TPP country. That includes Vietnam, Malaysia, where they've got child labor, Vietnam, where they've also been arresting and interrogating union activists, and Brunei. I don't know how many people noticed that the Sultan of Brunei last fall, of just before Christmas, banned any Christmas celebrations because it was an affront to Islam. Well, where are the Republicans going to show now whether they believe and what their position is on that? Mm-hmm. You know, that,
Is this the president's last big pitch, State of the Union for Trans-Pacific Partnership? What do you think?
I think it's his last public pitch, but I don't think it's going to be his last pitch. Mm-hmm. I know that he's gotten members of his cabinet and he's gotten others to go out on the stump and stump for it. And in many cases, they're having to confront the reality of the people that will attend their so-called meetings are people from the multinational business community. Mm-hmm. Now, we've also seen just in the recent weeks where Ford is aggressively coming out against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We've seen where the titanium manufacturers that make titanium, and titanium is important to the military industry, that they have come out against the TPP. So there are some businesses now that have come out against the TPP, and I think there's probably going to be others.
And I think last week when the Chamber of Commerce came out and the Manufacturers Association, which I'll never understand, came out in favor of it, it was just an attempt for them to get it back into the news cycle in a positive light before the State of the Union. But the facts continue to mount against this for American workers. And we got to see light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, our lawmakers, in fact, the only thing that can stop this now is American lawmakers.
There's a misconception about the American Chamber of Commerce. The American Chamber of Commerce, so this is for me a lot of frustration. They don't represent the small and medium-sized manufacturers who want to make things in America. Mm-hmm. The Chamber of Commerce represents global multinationals. That's where their bread and butter is. And these small, sort of regional mom-and-pop manufacturers, they get left behind. They don't get any consideration from the Chamber of Commerce. Mm-hmm. And there's the Business Council, and the Sustainable Business Council has almost 200,000 members, and we're trying to encourage them to come out against the TPP because they're basically against it. But they have this democratic process of consulting their membership, and hopefully when they've done that, they'll also come out against the TPP.
All right. United Steelworkers International President Leo Gerard with us here at Ed Schultz News and Commentary. We'll see you on the tube here coming down the road, my friend.
And we're looking forward to seeing you back on television.
Yeah, it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it. All right, Leo, great to visit. All the best. Steelers over Broncos. I'm all about it. 10+, all right?
You got a deal.
All right, my man. Thank you. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary, brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean of the iSave team. Now this. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com, www.biogreenclean, and order today. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, President of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
This Monday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary is brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, Bio Green Clean, and the iSave team. What it's going to come down to in the first two showdowns politically is who's got the ground game. I mean, these poll numbers are so close and within the margin of error. Bernie Sanders has a little bit of a favor in New Hampshire over Clinton. Clinton has a little bit of a favor over Sanders in Iowa, but all very close. So it's going to come down who gets their people out. How motivated are these folks going to be to go into a caucus situation or to come out in cold weather in New Hampshire and have a turnout for their candidate? They're both raising monies like crazy. If Bernie Sanders did not get the nomination, he'd be the richest loser in modern day politics. It is amazing what he's put together. And look at it this way. Let's just say that it goes to Clinton. Where does this leave Bernie Sanders in the Senate? He has upped his stock. There used to be a time when Bernie Sanders would co-sponsor a bill or author a bill and everybody would run for the hills because he was labeled a socialist. In return, he is now a hit. He's going to be used in fundraising by other colleagues because they realize that, you know what, his message is working. Hillary Clinton, no doubt a political icon, and she has a heck of a machine. But the fact is that who's going to come out and do what in Iowa and New Hampshire to set the tone of this race? For more on this, John Nichols, Washington correspondent of The Nation. John, good to have you with us.
Ed, it's great to be with you.
Turnout. Both operations are pretty well entrenched in Iowa and doing everything they can. So what happens?
Well, boy, that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? But here's what we know. There's a lot of evidence over the last few days that the month of December and early January, it turned out to be a pretty good time for Bernie Sanders in Iowa. A lot of evidence that, he fell down in the polls. He was far behind Hillary Clinton in most of the polling in, November into early December. Now the polling seems to be suggesting that he is polling even. And here's what's important to understand about that. As you just suggested, there's no way to accurately poll the Iowa caucuses because of a couple realities. Number one, they are long. It's not just walking in and checking a box and walking out of
No, they're a process, yep.
And you cannot do it in advance. You can't send in your absentee caucus vote. And so you got to go out there on a potentially very cold winter night, and factors like weather and all sorts of other things come into play. What we do know is this. There are Iowa caucus goers who are going to show up no matter what. The kind of core. People have been doing it since the 1970s. A lot of those people know Hillary Clinton quite well. And so it's fair to suggest that she begins with some significant advantages rooted in long experience, personal connection. And I've seen Hillary Clinton on the ground in Iowa. She is working it. I've seen her after events for an hour, shaking hands, posing for pictures, giving it a lot of that personal connection.
Yeah, she's not phoning it in. There's no question about that.
So she's got that.
She's campaigning hard.
That's right. She's got that on her side. Now, for Bernie Sanders, I've seen him working it in Iowa, too. What's remarkable with him is how very young his crowds are. Way younger than anything you see really generally in politics.
Why is it? Is it because he's convinced them that he's sincere about debt-free college, health care, the economy? What is it?
I think it goes way beyond that. I think it has to do with I don't want to overplay the word, but a cynicism about most of politics. Mm-hmm. I think younger folks have been promised a lot and been disappointed frequently.
So he's tapping into the same thing that Trump is tapping in, but at a different method, a different message, but basically the same thing, that the politics of America isn't working for you.
But let's do that demographic divide, Ed. Let's say if you're over 50, your cynicism, your frustration may well take you to Trump.
Yeah. If
you're under 30, it's very different. It takes you to Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders offers you a vision of something very different. Mm-hmm. I don't think that word socialism is scaring any of the young people. And so here's the question for Iowa, Ed. Can Bernie Sanders get a lot of very young people to the polls? If he cared to the caucuses, and can he teach them how to do it? Can he make it work? That's not going to be easy. But if he pulls it off, he has some real potential there. I can tell you, Ed, you and I may both be in Iowa for the caucuses. If we are, if we're standing in a parking lot at a caucus, watching people go in, one of the big ones in Des Moines or Dubuque or someplace like that, and we see a lot of people under 40 showing up, we might be able to start making predictions right then.
That's the key. Who shows up? Who shows up, how they show up. Both ground games are pretty similar as far as staff, as far as, paid help. And this is maybe the most intense it's ever been in Iowa for the Democrats. Now, let's talk about Ted Cruz. He leads in Iowa. He clearly has tapped into what I call the Huckabee crowd. And the Huckabee crowd and the Santorum crowd is what I call them because they're the evangelicals, and they have proven that this crowd can take you to victory. So Trump comes out with the accusation that, and then he tries to pin it on somebody else, saying, well, it's not me. The Democrats are worried about whether Ted Cruz is going to be eligible to be president. This is Cruz responding.
But the substance of the issue is clear and straightforward. As a legal matter, the Constitution and federal law are clear that the child of a U.S. citizen born abroad is a natural-born citizen.
So he's defending himself that he is eligible to be president. This is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Back in 2008, there was bipartisan legislation passed unanimously in the Senate declaring that Senator John McCain was a natural-born citizen even though he was born in a territory. I know you don't like to get in the middle of the 2016 campaign, but there have been questions raised about Ted Cruz's eligibility to be president. Will the Senate pass legislation declaring that he is also a natural-born citizen?
Well, you're right. I've made a point of staying out of the presidential race. These guys are all running their races as hard as they can in the ways that they think will be helpful to them. I don't think the Senate ought to get in the middle of it.
What do you make of that, John Nichols? Double standard here? Why'd they do it before, but they're not going to do it now?
Oh, there's huge double standards. Let us understand that completely. But also, Ed, aren't you intrigued by the refusal of so many of these folks to just outright defend Ted Cruz?
Well, I think that the Republican carte blanche are nervous about Trump, and they certainly don't want to derail somebody that could beat him.
But they're also illegally Cruz, too, I think. And I find it interesting that instead of saying, Mitch McConnell, who serves with Ted Cruz in the U.S. Senate, who literally has to deal with him personally, has, been around him a lot, for better or worse, won't say, well, of course he's a U.S. citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And Reince Priebus was asked just the other day, and Reince Priebus said, I'm not going to get into that. I mean, that's an odd kind of defense. It's not absolutely, I'm sure he's a U.S. citizen.
Well, why wouldn't they be able to back up Ted Cruz if he says it's settled law, and the soundbite that we just played cuts right to it? Why is it so hard for Republicans to reiterate that if it's the truth?
Well, that's what I can't figure out. I find it a very weird response because, let me tell you this. I believe in a very liberal interpretation of that constitutional language. I don't like the idea that we would suggest, somebody's can't be president because their parents are traveling or even out of the country for a significant amount of time. So while I disagree with him on politics, I'm probably with Ted Cruz. And I'd defend him pretty far on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see why that can't just be why you can't see Mitch McConnell and Reince Priebus and all these people riding in and just saying what I just said. Why? Let's put this thing aside. Come on, this is silly. What I sense is that there's a lot of the Republican establishment that fears Trump, and they fear Cruz as much or more because this is an incredibly volatile, incredibly difficult, but incredibly disciplined person who might be their nominee, but who, A, as with Trump, they would probably have very little control over, and B, could well blow the whole thing up.
Final point I want to make with John Nichols, Washington correspondent of The Nation, with us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Is the campaign of Jeb Bush entering into the arena of embarrassment? I mean, he can't make news. He's not drawing any crowds. He's got a boatload of money. I don't know where it came from, but the fact of the matter is that he is at 5% every single poll. What do you make of it?
Well, this is the difficulty of our billion-dollar politics now. You have essentially the equivalent of investors. You go out a year or two before a campaign and then throughout it, and you convince people to keep giving you tons of money. You can't drop out, right? I mean, Bush is in this terrible position where he's got all these resources. He's got people that have been very committed to him, but he hasn't been able to get traction. And here's the final stage of Bush, as best I can see it. If you look at the polls in New Hampshire, not in Iowa, but in New Hampshire, you see that Bush, Christie, Kasich, maybe some of Rubio, I mean, you add all those numbers together, and you've got an establishment total that is substantially larger, or at least equal to Trump's numbers. Mm-hmm. And so I think they go on in the fantasy that somehow at the last minute they can pull all these strings together. But that would require, you understand what that would require? It would require people like Chris Christie to overcome their egos. And I just don't think, I don't see that collapsing into a mainstream establishment alternative. Yeah. So Bush, spends his money but just doesn't get any traction.
John Nichols, always great to visit. Keep on the trail, my friend. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ed.
Washington correspondent of The Nation magazine, John Nichols, with us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. We're back tomorrow.